Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. Well, that's it. The 2-month marathon of IFA election hustings all over the country is over, and members have started to cast their ballots. Let's take a listen to the closing arguments of the 3 presidential candidates at the last public debate in Tullamore on Tuesday night. Firstly, Joe Healy, then Flor McCarthy, and finally Henry Burns.
Thanks very much, Chairman, fellow candidates, ladies and gentlemen, and Aidan, thanks for those kind and resourceful and encouraging words there at the end, because I think that's what's important. The organisation moves forward together in a united force, a united group, and delivers for Irish farmers. That's our strength. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said at the start, this election is an extraordinary election and one that the future of the organisation depends on. But the organisation, despite all that's good in it, and there's a lot good in it, it always has to be capable of adapting and changing in order to remain relevant to all farmers right throughout the country. We need, as I said, the branches, the county executives, the commodity committees and National Council to be working in sync with each other and encouraging each other and delivering for each other. I believe that over the past 25 years, my roles in different areas, and I feel very strongly that the next president of the IFA has to have experience of media, staff, members, banks, credit. I have that by working, being president of Macra na Pharma, vice president of the European Young Farmers, chairman and manager of Athenry Mart, a livestock reporter for the Farming Independent. That's what the next president of the IFA needs. I need your vote to be that next president. Thank you very much for your attendance and your attention, and above all your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to call on Flor McCarthy now next. So,
good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming here tonight to listen to us. I come here tonight with a track record of work within IFA. I served a long apprenticeship, both as county chairman, as livestock rep, now as national rural development chairman. I delivered a programme worth 4.2 billion to farmers, which they will benefit all the way up to 2020. I've shown I can deliver on behalf of farmers in the worst financial crisis of this country. I also have the experience within my own farming enterprise. I've expanded that enterprise of the last number of years, substantially expanded it. It's not an easy achievement in a remote part of South Kerry. That's why I come here tonight with a strong track record of delivery. And I also have the experience that I can move relatives and buses at national level for IFA. So I seek your number 1 vote for Flor McCarthy to be the next president of IFA. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thanks, Flor. Henry.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the final debate. Before you make your very important decision, people have started to vote tonight. And this is a huge decision for the organisation. All I'm going to say to you is that I have never shied away from difficult decisions, either when ministers didn't do what we want them to do, including sleeping outside the Department of Agriculture for 13 days and 13 nights when it had to go to that level. Of course, you don't have to do that all the time. When you do that some of the time, it wakes them up and it makes you realise that they're dealing with someone tough and that won't compromise. I have not compromised over the years. I have never compromised on the farmer view, being first and foremost at the minister's desk. I've worked with 3 commissioners, 3 ministers for agriculture from different parties, and I've treated them all the same, hard and a tenacity, never lying down with the arguments that are cohesively representing farmers' views. And they have brought delivery. They have brought delivery. But more importantly, I believe in the future of this organisation. I believe we can do it together. I believe because I have seen what can be done. I have sat across tables where the power of you have been behind us, and I can see what it can do. And you need to understand that. And you need to have done the hard road. You just need to have done the trenches. And I have done that with you, beside you. I will do it beside you again. And I would love to, dearly love to lead you all into a better IFA, into a better farm income, into a better situation where we sit at the top of society in Ireland, rightly where we should. Thank you.
And for a final chance to hear the three candidates, don't miss our live special debate this Friday at 8 p.m. on farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
This week marks 1 year since the abolition of milk quotas, and we have interviewed Irish dairy farmers at home and abroad to hear their view of the past 12 months. Philip Ruttle is one of them, and he farms with his father in County Limerick. He started milking 4 years ago, and the drop in prices has not changed his plans.
I started milking 4 years ago. Previously the farm was in sucklers. We had purebred Anguses, selling bulls and heifers off the farm. You also had a small bit of tillage. Since then I've grown the herd from 30 cows, and this year I'm currently milking, we'll be milking 75 cows. Current volume is 26.3 litres at 347 fat and 398 protein. The herd is crossbred herd. My aim is to build the herd up to 90 cows and produce milk in a sustainable and profitable manner.
We also talked to Olin Greenan, who is from County Monaghan and farms in New Zealand. Let's hear his perspective on the current state of the dairy markets.
Watching the Irish situation, the removal of quotas, and many sort of blame that for the glut in the market. But the truth is, the writing was on the wall before that. You know, we've had China went stagnant with the Russian ban, and I suppose the timing of Ireland's the quotas coming off was poor, I suppose, unfortunately. So my message, I suppose, for farmers is control what you can control. You know, the reality is you have no control over the weather, your interest rates, the milk price, but you've actually got a lot of things inside your own farm gate that you can control. And I'm talking about, you know, maybe driving some of those physical performing things, you know, utilising more grass, compact calving, you know, monitoring things like your concentrates fed per cow, your heifer live weights, and those physical things will actually turn into financial things. They'll turn into financial performance, because you'd be surprised how much actually extra you can get inside your own farm gate. I think another thing to remember is that we are trading a commodity. It comes in cycles, and we are at the bottom of a cycle. Now, nobody knows when that upturn is going to come, but the laws of economics will state that it will recover in time. And I think in the meantime, we have to sort of maybe take a stop and smell the roses and realise, you know, there is more to life than low milk prices, and really, take time with your family and friends. And, you know, if we all stick together, I think we'll all come out battling at the other side.
And we've more farmer interviews in Ireland and overseas in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and on our video channel farmersjournal.tv.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Now you've just heard Olin Greenan mention China among the factors in the current milk price slump. But what is happening inside the country's dairy industry? Our digital editor, Thomas Hubert, met Kevin She Baoqing, a Chinese dairy planner, at this month's Nuffield Contemporary Scholars Conference in Cavan.
Kevin, can you tell us a bit more about what you do in China in the dairy industry? What's your job like?
Okay, my job is I work as the vice president of the East Rock Farming Technologies Corporation Limited. Domestically, we were engaged in the dairy development of China by providing the turnkey solutions to the dairy farmers or dairy companies. And overseas, we have a bunch of global partners from Canada, US, and even Europe. We work together to serve the customer all around 50 countries all around the world. So we supply them the products, or equipments used in the dairy industry. So basically, like the products like freestalls, headlocks, fans, ventilation system, or influent system.
Are you involved in livestock as well?
No, we haven't been in that business yet. That's another scope of the dairy.
So what is the dairy industry like in China today? You've presented here about the various steps in the recent history. What is the picture at the moment?
The picture of the moment in China, well, I can see this is not good. You know, it's like here in the European, because the milk price is pretty low. Actually, our milk price is higher. I believe doubled the raw milk price here in Europe. But our problem is efficiency. You know, the dairy in China is just starts to develop for about 10 years or 20 years. So time is pretty short. And our guys, it is pretty easy to have the hardware ready for big size, but it's very hard to have the software ready for the size. So actually, we are in a lake of the qualified people who can manage the big size dairy, and and also a bunch of other people like qualified vegetarian and qualified nutritionist. We don't have that. So basically, the software part is what is our major bottleneck for development for now. And another thing is, for the government side, they actually realized that the dairy is disjointed with our agriculture. So here, if you have a dairy in the Western world, you will have a land surrounded, so you can put your manure back in, and also you can crop and harvest the feed from the land and use it back in the dairy. But we call that a closed circle. But we don't have that circle in China yet. So I think by the end of the year 2015, the government realized that because the soil quality in China is getting poorer and poorer. The reason is the overuse of the chemical fertilizers, and also there is something about the ownership of the land. So, things will become very complicated if we expand it. But the key thing is, the government realized they need to change a little bit and allow the purchase and selling of the land, but probably not the ownership, but at least the right of using. And then they realized that they need to allow the irrigation system with effluent from the dairy or from other animal husbandry industry. So the effluent is the best organic fertilizer for the land, and it is very friendly to the land. So that's some policy change from the government, and that was a bottleneck for our development as well. So for now, honestly speaking, as long as dairy is concerned, that's my belief that the whole country is thinking about the size and direction of this development. Well, because because the consumption size is still there, right? We have the largest population of the world, so the dairy size is fated to be the biggest in the world, at least the consumption. So the engine, we still have enough fuel to burn it. The problem is we need to do some internal adjustment ourselves. So the good thing is the government and the people, they're actually thinking what is the right size for the dairy in China. Is the 10,000 size a good one?
10,000 cows?
Yes, I don't think so. Honestly speaking, I don't think so. I think the size good for China should be around 2,000, 3,000. And also, because of the change and development of the dairy sizes in China, a lot of small dairy farms, they actually has been eliminated from the market. And that's not a good thing. That's not good for the market as well.
That's important for us because we in Europe and especially in Ireland export a lot to China. So it's important for us to know, is China going to become self-sufficient, or is it still going to need some imports from here? What do you think?
I don't have the actual data, but I believe for the infant milk powder, the market was basically occupied by the international brands, from Ireland, from Germany, from America, from Australia. So I believe that's going to be lasted for a long time, because agriculture is not as simple as industry. Industry just to put a plant over there, you have the standard of production set up, and you're good to go. Qualified worker, you're good to go. But agriculture, you need to understand the land and understand the philosophy between the land. So that takes time. We realize, actually it's a common sense in China that today's world is an open world. Nobody can live without the support from the others. So trying to be self-sufficient is not a very accurate conception, because I just take this for example. We have signed an agreement with the Australian government already, and we lowered the tariff of the agricultural products from Australia to zero. So there is a zero tariff, and I believe that's not. If that's just the self-sufficiency we are seeking for, then that's not the right decision. We need to close the door and build a wall. So from that, I believe we will continue to work with the partners globally. So, if Ireland or American is good at making milk, then why not just buy some from countries? And to me, it's basically the relationship between demand and the supply. And also, it's all about the prices. So if your prices is lower than us, then there will always be a market over there. So as long as the government is concerned, honestly speaking, because the dairy, in the overall agricultural size, dairy is still a small portion, compared with rice, soybean, altogether. Dairy is just a part. So I don't think China is going to close the door for the dairy import, because that's pretty stupid.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
On Tuesday, anti-eviction activists protested outside the offices of a law firm involved in the case of a repossessed farmer who died by suicide last week. My colleague Odile Evans was there, and she spoke with Jerry Beades, a spokesman for the New Land League.
Well, there's a number of organisations have come together. I'm the chairman of the Friends of Banking Ireland and spokesperson for the Land League groups, who had a meeting last Sunday night in Tipperary, Sunday week, and decided that they would vent their protests here at the solicitor that was involved in the jailing of this man that ultimately led to the sad situation where he took his own life. Out of respect for the family, we're not naming them or anything, and we're leaving them grieve. But there's another family facing jail in 2 weeks' time with this same company, and we're calling on an investigation into their practices. Prime Time did a programme on it, the Examiner did an investigation programme on it, and yet nobody took any action. And there's up to 40 families facing what was basically a scam. They were lent money at the time at horrendous rates of interest, which a lot of times they weren't told. They were led into the lending. A subprime lender that has no licence and doesn't have to be licensed, but this is the tip of the iceberg at the moment, so people decided that they had to do something.
And I suppose these aren't isolated incidents. A lot of people that you're here on the protest, it's all around the country is the problem.
Well, we would reckon that the numbers are as large as 500,000 people cannot service their debt. We've been speaking out for 3 years. We've been highlighting evictions. We've been sending out press releases on the days of evictions when people let us, to try and get the message out. And finally, only when the politicians were knocking on doors did they realise there was an anger there. So there's 500,000 people, there's 2 million people work and pay tax in the state, and therefore 25% of the people in the state are in some form of negative equity, they're on interest only. There's a 20 billion time bomb of interest only, and now the loans are being sold to these hedge funds who are debt collectors. That's a proper name for them, debt collectors, and they're not going to leave people on interest only, and they're now demanding full repayments. All of the banks are now selling this debt for 20% to these American overseas debt collectors, and a lot of people won't talk about it. That's the biggest problem, and so the time has come, and a lot of people are expecting in the negotiations that some of the politicians will take it up. I know Deputy Matty McGrath has had it at the top of his agenda in talks in recent weeks, and we hope the rest of them will all come on board and drive the agenda of debt.
And maybe you could just give me an idea of what happens when these things go to the High Court. What happens then?
Well, what happens is you have a firm of solicitors here. An awful lot of people, once they've experienced in the courts, they lose total respect for the system. We see on a daily basis people are brought into court, the bank paperwork is wrong, yet the firms of solicitors representing lie in court, and people get railroaded along. The judges, because they're part of the legal system, have no sympathy for lay litigants. Most of these people have no legal representation. This particular firm here took 15,000 off a woman on a farm, told her she'd a great case, and once the 15 grand was handed over, then Morris Lyons told her that she'd no case. So this is what the legal profession is doing. When you think of it, there's 10,000 legal eagles in the country, and they're holding 5 million people to ransom. That's effectively what's going on, and the people at this stage have had enough.
Just maybe tell us a little bit about why you're here today, and what this company, and we can maybe.
Well, this year you see today the nameplate has been taken down. They pulled the blinds down. I don't know whether that's to hide themselves or out of respect for what they've done to the family. But these people have been going in and out of court with families, mainly farms. They mainly lent to farms. Their lending method was a scam. And as I said, there has been investigative journalists doing investigations into this the authorities now need to look at it. It just can't go on any longer. And this organisation, this legal firm, is Carlisle Mortgages in all intents. Mr. Fahy is the principal behind it, but there's a whole load of shadow companies. There's a man in England that was jailed for fraud involved in it. So it's time that somebody took a stand and took a deep look inside the doors here. That's badly needed.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Some politicians seem to have heard Jerry Beades' message, judging by the comments made by Labour TD Willie Penrose this Wednesday. My colleague Anthony Jordan met him in Leinster House.
We're talking about Minister for Housing, and that's very important in terms of rural areas as well. I mean, housing situation is certainly critical in rural areas as well. I mean, it obviously ultra critical importance in the urban areas, but in the rural areas, there's too many cross-government agencies and departments dealing with little bits of rural issues, or pertaining to rural issues. Various government allocations and everything else. So what we need to do is bring that under an umbrella department of rural development and innovation, or something of that nature, and concentrate the resources there, and that gives a better overview, more focused, and strategy can be more focused, coming as it does from one centralised department.
And you're talking about a Minister for Housing. Would you think about the prospects for a Minister for Rural Affairs in the future?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there has to be, because I mean, the time has actually gone. Well, I mean, there was for 2 years there we had Minister Anne Phelan, and she certainly had an input and showed us what could be done. But with her resources were extremely limited. There was only small amounts of money granted under the CEDR, and that's no use. It's no use paying lip service to it. Establishing a minister, and I know Minister Phelan was very committed in this area, very, very committed, and she had a lot of very enterprising and innovative ideas. But without money, you're strangled at birth. And so it's no use setting up talking shops and forums and everything else. What you need to do is set up a department and give it a budget, a significant budget.
Anthony also spoke with the Kerry Independent TD, Michael Healy-Ray, who was also pushing for the appointment of a Minister for Rural Affairs in his discussions with the main parties on the formation of a government.
The one good thing is whoever will form the government, whether it's going to be Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or minority or whoever it is, at least everybody is agreeing, and I was the first person to make the suggestion, was that it's vitally important that we have a Minister for Rural Affairs. Now, I believe that when the government will be formed, whenever that is going to be, there will be a Minister for Rural Affairs. The whole issue of that is, the importance of it is to rural-proof issues, whether they're environmental issues, whether it's financial issues, whether it's even health, believe it or not. Because I'll give you an example of why health would be so important in rural issues. I have many instances in my head of rural GPs who are telling me that financially they find it very hard to keep going at the moment. And when they will retire, or their time will finish, there'll be nobody to replace them, because it'll be financially impossible for some new young GPs to say, oh yeah, I'm going to set up here. So you have those type of situations. Rural proofing all policies is vitally important. If you want to know why this government lost the election, and it didn't as though I should be telling them, because I really believe in my heart and soul they were the most anti-rural government since the foundation of the state. I really believe that. They lost touch. And any time you lose touch with your roots and with the people in the countryside, you're finished. And that's what happened to them. Labour completely lost the run of themselves, and so did Fine Gael. So we finished up with an anti-rural. All their policies were anti-rural. It's important that we change all that.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, the European Parliament is the latest institution opposing the renewal of the licence to sell glyphosate, the main ingredient in total herbicides such as Roundup. Thomas Hubert and our tillage editor Andy Doyle have more details.
There was a number of votes in March this month, or lack of votes. There was a panel of experts at the European Commission that didn't meet, was due to meet on the renewal of the glyphosate license, but it didn't happen because of disagreements within that panel. And there was also a vote in the European Parliament with MEPs coming out strongly against renewing the license for glyphosate as it stands. Andy, can you tell us a bit more about where we stand and what can happen with this license that is necessary for retailers, co-ops and all stores to make make glyphosate available to farmers?
Yes, indeed, Thomas. It's a complex question, and what has happened is also quite complex. Basically, glyphosate has been around since 1974. Very few people anywhere have any difficulties with the actual active that's involved in it. But last year, or the year before, the World Health Organization suggested that it could have carcinogenic effects. And that generated a lot of conversation, a lot of difficulties, and a lot of challenges. It was subsequently referred to the European Food Safety Authority, who looked at all of the available information, and they concluded very strongly that there was no risk of cancer associated with glyphosate. So we then have a situation that has evolved since, that the people who are probably anti-Monsanto is maybe the best way to say it, although everybody has reason to be concerned about every piece of scientific information. But we have our own internal panel of experts who say that it's safe, but nobody wants to believe them because it suits people to believe something else. That's my fear as to what's going on. If it's not safe, then nobody particularly wants to have an unsafe product in the market. That's the bottom line for everybody everywhere. So because of the fact that there is this uncertainty about whether or not it is or is not carcinogenic, which was generated by scientists in terms of their different opinions, at the Commission meeting a few weeks ago, it was decided that because there wasn't going to be a majority in favour, that they would postpone the vote on the re-registration of glyphosate. Now, the problem that the scientists at the Commission level have is that the active ingredient is seen as very safe in terms of its performance in the environment. It's been around a long time, it's caused no major problems. And if they are forced to bring in changes to glyphosate, which is regarded as the very safe ones, there will inevitably be consequences for other things which would come up for registration or re-registration, which would be regarded as much less safe for the environment as a whole. And that's very much part of what's going on. There's a kind of a cat and mouse game going on at this point in time between the people who believe that it's entitled to its 15-year registration period, and those that believe that no, because there's uncertainty, that it should not be certainly registered for 15 years, or in some instances some might feel that it shouldn't be registered at all. And that's very much the cat and mouse that's going on. Last week then there was a vote amongst the European Environmental Committee of the Parliament, and they decided that no, they did not want to support a recommendation to the Commission which would give glyphosate a 15-year re-registration. There's to be another vote, I think, at the European Parliament as a whole, which would be, I think, in a few weeks' time. And the Commission have said that if the European Parliament doesn't support their recommendation at a very high level of acceptance, that they will not bring the process to a conclusion. And as a consequence, that by default, glyphosate could literally fade away from the market if it's not going to be re-registered.
Exactly, because the current license expires at the end of June this year. So without agreement before that, it will go off the shelves effectively. What would that mean for farmers practically in the fields? Are there any alternatives? Are there any other options if glyphosate was to become unavailable?
Basically, there is no alternative. I mean, glyphosate is sold under many different trademarks all over the world, and in any one country there's lots of different trademarks, but there is no alternative. We've lost so many actives that if you're looking at the concept of having a complete herbicide which kills, a total herbicide which kills all vegetation, there is nothing else. The last one or two, paraquat would have been a predecessor. It's gone for a number of years. Basta was another one that was there. It's now gone. And so there are no other total herbicides in the market today to replace what it would do. Can you live without glyphosate? The answer has to be that you would if you had to. But the very fact that there are products being taken off the market which are deemed by our own European experts as being very safe bodes not just for the future of glyphosate, but for the future of very many other actives, and that's where farming would get an awful lot more difficult. All the other products that could be taken from the shelf as a consequence of what is not a scientific decision, but rather a political decision that's being made with this particular active.
Okay, Andy, thank you very much. We'll follow, of course, this story developing in April for the next vote in the European Parliament, and whatever consequences come out of that, all in the Farmers Journal and at farmersjournal.ie as it develops. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
There's a detailed survey on the health of farming women in Irish country living this week, and the good news is that they are much better at looking after their health than the farming men. There are some areas of concern, though, as our health correspondent Margaret Hawkins explained to Mary Phelan.
Well, I think generally it's excellent. It's very, very obvious that women are really aware of their health and conscious of doing health checks and getting out there and going to the GP for the blood pressure, cholesterol and so on, just to make sure that they're doing okay. We had published some details about farming men over the years, and there was concern there about heart health and not having all these checkups. Men are less inclined to do that, but I think women, Irish farming women, are definitely going out there and having the checkups and looking after themselves.
Okay, and are there issues that farming women are more worried about than others? I know that there was questions and stress was coming back as a factor in many instances.
Yeah, stress was there. There were about 3% said they were stressed all the time. And things like money problems and illness in the family, that was a really big one. And relationship problems and farm record keeping. They were kind of the main three topics that seemed to stress people. And other things like succession planning and, the long hours and having rearing teenagers, all those things came into it as well. But overall, stress did appear, and it was something that I suppose affects every part of society, just like all the other problems, like heart issues and so on. 50% of the women in the survey said that they had a family history of heart disease. And when I was talking to a spokesperson from the Heart Foundation, I said, "Is that not a bit high?" But she said, "No, it's not. Heart disease is the number one killer in Ireland, so it's not unusual that many women would have relatives, who had a family history." But in terms of the positives, Irish farming women, they're not smokers. Only 2% of women over 65 said they smoked, 5% in the 30 to 39 group and 4%, so that's absolutely great. In terms of the exercise, they seem to be more active than the national average, and alcohol, I'd say it's lower than what the national average is as well. So there were lots of things like farming women didn't have takeaways twice a week. Obviously they're more used to just cooking a good meal at home and not depending too much on that. So there were lots of positives, but I suppose the single biggest issue was that most of the women weren't happy with their weight. It was just one of those things that if they could change, a change that they'd like to make was to lose weight and to be more active.
Okay, and how does all of this compare with the rest of the population, both the positives and negatives? I mean, I saw that the figure for exercise every day was an average of 67% over all the categories, and even in the 40 to 49 age group, there was 77% of them saying they were active every day, which seems like a very, very positive statistic, and I wouldn't imagine that maybe other groups of women in society are doing as much exercise, or if they are, it's something that's surprising me.
Yes, exactly. We had a spokesperson from the Heart Foundation, the Irish Heart Foundation, Janice, to compare the figures that we found with the national average, and exercise came out very well. It was really that the national figure for people having 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week was about 24%, but our figures are much, much higher than that, with 77% of the 40 to 49 group in our survey saying that they were that active every week. But what the Heart Foundation person, Janice, did say was that, there is a little caveat there that it is self-reported, and she did highlight the fact that exercise, to be really useful, has to be where you get a little bit warmer, the old heart beats a bit faster, and that you can carry on a conversation, but you're a little bit breathless. So it was, I suppose, the importance of it being moderately intense exercise, and that was the key. And I suppose with people saying that they do take the exercise, maybe it wasn't quite that intense, but it's just something to think about related to the exercise. But on the other hand, farming women are very active. You know, that group, the age group 40 to 49, they're mothers, they're busy, they're working, they're out on the farm, maybe in another job as well. So it could be very, very possible that they are taking more than their required amount of exercise.
Okay, well, that's all really interesting, Margaret, and your article in Country Living this week is very, very comprehensive. So pick up this week's Farmers Journal if you are interested in reading all about the health of farming women. Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Mary.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.